Commander Duhayan pressed his face against the cold metal of the observation window and watched the purple planet grow bigger in front of their ship. The planet looked like a giant marble spinning slowly in the dark space around it, beautiful purple, and white clouds swirled across its surface like paint mixing in water. He had never seen anything so amazing in all his years traveling between the stars. The ship was called Harmony, and it was not like the big military ships Duhayan usually traveled. On this ship was small and painted white with blue stripes along its sides. There were no weapons attached to its hull. No missile launchers, no plasma cannons, no energy shields to protect them from enemy fire. The ship was built only for peace and friendship between different worlds. Duhayan turned around and saw Ambassador Hanul sitting at a small desk in the corner of the room. She was reading from a tablet and moving her lips quietly as she practiced speaking in the alien language. The sounds she made were strange and musical, like birds singing in the morning. Hanul had spent 2 whole years learning how to speak with the Volterans, and she still worried that she might say something wrong during the big meeting. Hanul looked up from her tablet and smiled at Duhayan. Her eyes were bright with excitement and hope. She had dreamed about this day for so long, the day when humans would finally make real friends with an alien race, the day when Earth would join the big family of planets that traded and shared knowledge across the galaxy. The Volterans were famous throughout all the known worlds as the best traders and merchants in space. They controlled the most important hyperspace routes that connected different parts of the galaxy. If ships wanted to travel quickly between distant star systems, they had to use the routes that the Volterans protected and maintained. The aliens charged fair prices for using their routes, and they always kept their promises about safe passage. For 3 long years, human diplomats had been talking with Volteran representatives through video messages sent across space. The talks had been slow and careful because both sides wanted to make sure they understood each other properly. The Volterans seemed interested in human culture and technology, while humans desperately wanted access to the hyperspace routes that would make trade much easier for their growing colonies. The breakthrough had come 6 months ago when the Volteran High Council sent an official invitation to Earth. They wanted to meet human representatives in person on their homeworld of Valtara Prime. This was a great honor because the Volterans rarely allowed aliens to visit their most important planet. Most trade meetings happened on neutral space stations far from any homeworld president. Kyung-Soo had chosen Ambassador Hanul to lead the human delegation because she was known throughout Earth as the most skilled diplomat of her generation. She had successfully negotiated peace treaties between human colonies that had been fighting over mining rights. She had convinced angry farmers to share water during terrible droughts. She could make enemies become friends just by talking to them in the right way. The Volterans had been very specific about the kind of delegation they wanted to meet. Only 5 humans would be allowed to land on their planet. The group had to travel in an unarmed civilian ship with no military escort. This was supposed to show trust and peaceful intentions from both sides. Hanul had agreed immediately because she believed that showing trust was the first step toward building real friendship. Commander Duhayan had been chosen to accompany Hanul because he was one of the few military officers who had extensive experience with alien cultures. He had visited 17 different alien worlds during his career, and he understood how to behave respectfully. When meeting new species, he also had a calm personality that helped keep situations peaceful even when misunderstandings happened. The other 3 members of the delegation were young diplomats who specialized in trade law and cultural exchange. Minsu was an expert on interplanetary commerce who could help negotiate the details of trade agreements. Beoram was a linguist who could help translate complicated concepts between human and Volteran languages. Yunji was an artist who brought examples of human culture to share with their new alien friends. The cargo hold of the Harmony was filled with gifts from Earth, beautiful paintings that showed scenes from different human worlds, recordings of music from every continent on Earth, books that told stories about human history and dreams. For the future, samples of foods that grew only on Earth like chocolate and coffee and vanilla. The gifts were meant to show the Volterans that humans were a creative and peaceful species who valued beauty and knowledge. Duhayan walked over to where Hanula sitting and looked at the tablet in her hands. She was studying a list of Valteran customs and social rules. The aliens had very specific ways of showing respect during formal meetings. Hanul had memorized every detail because she knew that making a cultural mistake could ruin years of careful diplomatic work. Hanul looked up at Du Hyan and spoke in a quiet voice. She told him that she felt nervous about the meeting even though she had prepared for months. She worried that the Valterans might not like humans as much as their messages suggested. She worried that the trade agreement might fall apart if she said the wrong words at the wrong time. The future of human expansion into space depended on making this first contact successful. Du Hyan sat down next to Hanua and reminded her of all the successful negotiations she had completed on Earth. He told her that her natural talent for understanding people would work just as well with aliens as it did with humans. He said that the Valterans had invited them to their home world because they genuinely wanted to make a deal, not because they wanted to cause trouble. Through the observation window, they could see Valteran escort ships moving into formation. Around the Harmony, the alien vessels were sleek and beautiful with curved hulls that reflected the purple light from their home planet. The ships moved with perfect precision, like dancers performing a carefully rehearsed routine. Everything about the escort formation suggested ceremony and respect. Thanul stood up and walked to the window to get a better look at the alien ships. She had seen pictures of Valteran technology before, but seeing it in person was completely different. The ships seemed to glow with their own internal light, and they moved through space without making any sound that the human sensors could detect. The aliens clearly had much more advanced technology than humans did. One of the junior diplomats, Minsu, came running into the observation room with excitement written all over his face. He told Hanul and Du Hyan that the Valtaran High Council had sent a personal greeting message to their ship. The message welcomed the human delegation to Valtara Prime and expressed hope for a long and profitable friendship between their two species. Hanul smiled when she heard the news. This was another good sign that the Valterans were genuinely interested in making peace with humanity. She felt some of her nervousness fade away and be replaced by excitement about the historic meeting that was about to take place. She would be the first human ambassador to walk on an alien world and speak directly with an alien government. Hyan looked out at the purple planet that was now filling most of the observation window. They would be landing in less than 2 hours, and then human history would change forever. He thought about all the human colonies that were struggling to survive on distant worlds. With limited resources, the trade routes controlled by the Valterans could bring prosperity and growth to millions of human families. The escort ships guided the Harmony toward a massive space station that orbited above the planet. The station was even more beautiful than the ships, with crystal towers that caught and reflected light in amazing patterns. Heno pressed her face against the window and watched the station grow larger as they approached. She whispered that it looked like a palace made of stars floating in space. As the Harmony docked with the Valteran station, Du Hyan and Hanul made their final preparations for the meeting. They put on their best diplomatic uniforms and gathered the gifts they had brought from Earth. Hanul took one last look at her notes, then put the tablet away. She said she was ready to make history and create a better future for all humanity. The airlock doors opened with a soft hiss, and the human delegation stepped onto the Valteran station. For the first time, the air smelled different than Earth air, with a sweet floral scent that reminded Hanul of spring flowers. The gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth normal, which made walking feel like floating. Valteran officials were waiting to greet them in a large ceremonial chamber. The aliens were tall and graceful, with skin that changed colors like oil on water. Their faces were kind, and their voices made musical sounds when they spoke. They welcomed the humans with what seemed like genuine warmth and friendship. Hanul felt her heart fill with hope as she listened to the Valteran welcome speech. Everything was going perfectly, and she believed that this meeting would be remembered as the beginning of a golden age of cooperation between humans and aliens. She had no way of knowing that the Valterans were already planning to turn this moment of hope into humanity's greatest nightmare. The great crystal hall of the Valteran capital was more beautiful than anything Hanul had ever imagined. The ceiling stretched up so high that it disappeared into misty clouds, and the walls were made of some kind of living crystal that pulsed. With soft rainbow colors, thousands of Valteran citizens filled the vast space, their skin shimmering with excitement as they waited to witness this historic moment. Ambassador Hanul stood at the center of a raised platform wearing her finest diplomatic uniform. The blue and silver fabric caught the light from the crystal walls and made her look like she was glowing. The gift cases from Earth were arranged in a perfect circle around her feet, each one containing treasures that represented the best of human civilization. High Merchant Vextar sat on a throne made of twisted metal and glowing gems. His skin was darker than the other Valterans, and it shifted between deep purple and black, like storm clouds moving across the sky. His eyes were large and completely white, with no pupils visible. When he looked at Hanul, his expression seemed friendly, but something about his stare made Duhain feel uncomfortable. The ceremony began with traditional Valtaran music that sounded like wind chimes mixed with whale songs. Hanul had practiced her opening speech hundreds of times, but standing in this alien palace, surrounded by thousands of watching eyes, made her heart beat fast. She took a deep breath and began to speak in careful Valtaran words. Hanul talked about the dreams that humans had always carried in their hearts, dreams of exploring the stars and meeting other intelligent life, dreams of sharing knowledge and working together to build something greater than any one species could create alone. She spoke about trade and friendship and the bright future that both races could build if they worked as partners. The Voltaran audience listened in complete silence as Hanul's words were amplified throughout the massive hall. The translation devices turned her human speech into the musical tones of the alien language. Every word she spoke was filled with hope and sincerity. She truly believed that this moment would change the galaxy forever. When Hanul finished her speech, the hall erupted in what sounded like applause. The Valterans made a high-pitched humming sound that grew louder and louder until the crystal walls themselves began to vibrate with the noise. Hanul smiled and bowed deeply. In the traditional Valtaran way, her part of the ceremony was complete, and it had gone perfectly. High Merchant Vextar rose slowly from his throne, and the humming stopped instantly. The silence that followed was so complete that Hanul could hear her own heartbeat. The alien leader began to speak, but his words were not what anyone expected. His voice carried across the hall like thunder rolling across the sky. Vextar spoke about humans as if they were insects or parasites spreading through the galaxy. He said that the human species bred too quickly and consumed too many resources. He claimed that humans were selfish and violent creatures who destroyed everything they touched. He called them a plague that needed to be stopped before it infected the entire galaxy. Dohayan felt his blood turn cold as the translation reached his ears. This was not how diplomatic meetings were supposed to go. The Valterans had invited them here in peace. They had spent years negotiating this agreement. None of this made any sense. Vextar continued his speech, explaining that the trade agreement was nothing but a trap. The Valterans had no intention of sharing their hyperspace routes with humans. Instead, they planned to use this meeting to send a message to every species in the galaxy about what happened to races that tried to expand beyond their proper place before Duhayan could move or shout. A warning. Energy nets dropped from the ceiling and wrapped around all 5 members of the human delegation. The nets burned like fire wherever they touched skin, and they tightened automatically when anyone tried to struggle. Hanul cried out in pain, but she still tried to speak diplomatically. Hanul asked what misunderstanding had caused this situation. She offered to discuss any concerns the Volterans might have about human expansion. She suggested that perhaps they could find a compromise that would benefit both species. Her voice remained calm and reasonable, even though energy was burning through her uniform and into her flesh. Vextar laughed at Hanul's attempts at diplomacy. The sound was like breaking glass mixed with screaming wind. He told her that there had been no misunderstanding. The Valterans understood humans perfectly. They were weak creatures who hid their true nature behind pretty words about peace and cooperation. Giant screens descended from the crystal ceiling, and Duhain realized with horror that everything happening in the hall was being broadcast live. The Valterans were not just planning to hurt the human delegation, they were planning to show the entire galaxy exactly how they dealt with species they considered inferior. Voltarn guards dragged Hanul to a raised platform in the center. of the hall, the other human diplomats were forced to watch as more guards brought out devices that Duhayan had never seen before, but their purpose was clearly designed to cause pain. The guards moved with practiced efficiency as if they had done this many times before. Hanul continued to try reasoning with her captors even as they attached the torture devices to her arms and legs. She spoke about the benefits of peaceful cooperation. She reminded them that violence would only create more problems for everyone. She maintained her dignity and grace even though terror was visible in her eyes. The torture began slowly with devices that sent waves of agony through Hanul's nervous system but left no visible marks the Volterans wanted to break her spirit before they broke her body. They wanted to prove to the watching galaxy that human courage was just an illusion that would crumble under real pressure. Duhayan struggled against his energy bonds until his skin was burned and bleeding. He shouted offers to trade places with Hanul. He promised the Volterans anything they wanted if they would just stop hurting her. But his words only seemed to amuse Vextar, who ordered the guards to increase the intensity of the torture hours. Past and still, Hanul refused to beg or break. She endured pain that would have driven most creatures insane, but she never stopped trying to find a peaceful solution. She kept speaking about understanding and forgiveness even as the Volteron devices slowly destroyed her body piece by piece. The other human diplomats, Minsu, Boram, and Unji, were forced to watch every moment of Hanul's suffering. The Volterans wanted them to carry the message back to Earth, assuming they would be allowed to live. They wanted humanity to know exactly what fate awaited any species that dared to consider themselves equals to the great Volteran. Emperor Duhayan watched his friend and colleague die with a dignity that shamed her alien torturers. Hanul's last words were not curses or threats, but a quiet plea for the Volterans to reconsider their actions. She told them that violence would only create more violence and that there had to be a better way for different species to coexist. When Hanul finally died, the great crystal hall fell silent again. Vextar stood over her broken body and spoke directly into the broadcasting cameras. He declared that this was the fate that awaited any species that forgot their place in the galactic order. He said that the Volteran Empire would crush anyone who challenged their authority. The surviving humans were dragged back to their ship and launched into space with a recording of everything that had happened. The Volterans wanted Earth to see exactly how their peaceful ambassador had died. They wanted humanity to understand that they were nothing but prey animals in a galaxy dominated by superior predators. As the Harmony limped away from Voltara Prime, carrying its cargo of horror and death, Duhayan stared at the recording device the aliens had given him. He knew that when this footage reached Earth, everything would change. The Volterans thought they were sending a message of fear and submission, but Duhayan suspected they had just made the worst mistake in galactic history. The aliens had killed the one human who truly believed in peace between species. They had tortured to death the woman who spent her life trying to solve problems with words instead of weapons. They had no idea that in destroying Hanul, they had just awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping since the species first learned to make tools from stones and bones. The communication array on Luna Base picked up the automated signal from deep space at exactly 1400 hours. Earth Standard Time. The signal carried the compressed data package that the Volterans had sent as their diplomatic message to Humanity. Communications Officer Zhang Min almost deleted it, thinking it was another routine trade inquiry from an alien merchant ship. When Zhang Min opened the file and saw the first few seconds of video, his coffee cup slipped from his hands and shattered on the floor. The footage showed Ambassador Hanul standing in what looked like a beautiful crystal palace surrounded by thousands of alien creatures. He called his supervisor, thinking there might be good news from the diplomatic mission supervisor. Han Wu rushed over to Zhang Min's workstation, expecting to see recordings of a successful treaty signing. Instead, he found himself staring at images of torture and murder that made his stomach turn. The video showed every detail of what the Volterans had done to the human delegation. The aliens had recorded it all from multiple angles, like they were making a documentary about their cruelty. Within minutes, the footage was being transmitted to Earth Defense Command on priority channels. Admiral Taejin was in his office reviewing supply reports. when his aide burst through the door without knocking. The aide's face was white with shock and his hands were shaking as he handed over the datapad containing the Valteran message. Admiral Taejin had served in the Human Defense Force for 30 years, and he thought he had seen every kind of violence that intelligent creatures could inflict on each other. But watching Hanul die while still trying to negotiate for peace filled him with a rage so pure and cold that his vision went blurry. His first instinct was to launch every warship Earth had toward Valteran space immediately. The Admiral forced himself to watch the entire recording, even though every second felt like acid poured into his soul. He needed to understand exactly what humanity was dealing with. The Valterans had not killed Hanul in a moment of anger or fear. They had planned her torture carefully. They had broadcast it as entertainment. They had done it to send a message about human weakness. President Kyung-soo was in a cabinet meeting discussing agricultural subsidies when the emergency communication came through. The president's security chief whispered something in her ear that made her face go completely pale. She immediately dismissed the cabinet and ordered all communication networks to be secured under military encryption. The footage reached every major population center on Earth within 6 hours, despite attempts to control its distribution. The recording spread through civilian networks like a wildfire. No government censorship could contain it. Every human being on Earth and in the colonies watched Ambassador Hanul live grace and dignity while alien monsters tortured her for their amusement. The reaction was unlike anything in recorded human history. Recruitment centers across Earth were overwhelmed with volunteers who demanded the chance to join the military. Immediately, peaceful farmers abandoned their crops to enlist. Factory workers walked off their jobs to sign up for combat training. Even elderly citizens who had never held weapons in their lives showed up at military bases, begging to be allowed to fight. General Subin was conducting a routine inspection of the Mars Defense Garrison when reports started flooding in about the massive wave of volunteers. The numbers were staggering. Millions of humans were trying to join the military in a single day. The recruitment system completely broke down under the sheer volume of people demanding to serve. What frightened Subin more than the numbers was the look in the volunteers' eyes. She had seen soldiers motivated by patriotism and duty and even revenge before, but these people had something different. Burning inside them, they looked like they were willing to die just for the chance to make the aliens pay for what they had done to Hanul. President Kyung-soo called an emergency session of the World Council within 12 hours of receiving the Valteran message. Representatives from every nation and every major colony gathered in the Great Assembly Hall in Geneva. The building had been designed to host peaceful debates about trade and environmental policy, but now it felt like a war council planning the end of civilizations. There was no debate about whether humanity would respond with military force. The only question was how complete that response should be. Some representatives called for surgical strikes against Valteran military targets. Others demanded the complete destruction of every Valteran world as an example to any other aliens who might consider humanity easy prey. Minister Dong-wook from the Korean Colonial Alliance stood up and spoke words that would be remembered. For centuries, he said that the Valterans had made a mistake that no amount of apology could fix. They had tortured to death a woman whose only crime was believing that different species could be friends. They had done it for entertainment, and they had broadcast it as a warning to the galaxy. General Subin was called before the World Council to explain what kind of military response would be possible. She stood at the podium looking out at the assembled leaders of humanity and spoke in a voice that was calm but filled with iron. She told them that a single act of unforgivable cruelty had awakened something ancient and terrible in the human heart. Subin explained that humanity had been preparing for war since the first day they reached the stars. While other species focused on trade and diplomacy, humans had been building weapons and fortifications on every world they colonized. Every peaceful research station could become a military base. Every civilian factory could be retooled to produce instruments of destruction. The general revealed that Earth's military planners had been studying every known alien species for decades. They had developed weapons specifically designed to counter alien technology they had created. Strategies for fighting enemies with superior numbers or advanced equipment. They had prepared for every possible threat. except the one they were facing. Nosubin told the World Council that the Volterans had not just attacked human diplomats, they had attacked the very idea that peace was possible between species. They had proven that some aliens saw humanity as nothing but animals to be slaughtered for amusement. The galaxy needed to learn that this was a mistake. No civilization could survive, making President Kyung-soo called for a formal vote on military action, but it was just a formality. Every representative voted for war. The margin was not 90% or 95%, it was 100% of the human race. United in their determination to make the Volterans pay for their cruelty, the president signed the declaration of war with a pen made from metal taken from the first human settlement on Mars. The document was broadcast to every human world simultaneously, along with General Subin's promise that the galaxy would learn there were some lines that could never be crossed, some betrayals that could never be forgiven. Within hours of the declaration, massive industrial complexes across human space began their transformation from peaceful production to total war manufacturing. Shipyards that had been building cargo vessels started producing warships. Factories that made farming equipment retooled to create plasma weapons. Mining operations shifted from extracting resources for trade to extracting materials for destruction. Scientists who had spent their careers studying alien biology and psychology turned their knowledge toward developing new forms of warfare. Engineers who had designed peaceful space habitats began planning orbital bombardment systems. Teachers and doctors and artists put aside their peaceful professions to serve the war effort in any way they could. The most terrifying change was in humanity's approach to conflict itself. While other species fought for territory or resources or political advantage, humans were preparing to fight for something much more fundamental. They were going to war to prove that some actions carried consequences so severe that even thinking about them was dangerous. Admiral Tae-jin stood on the observation deck of the space station orbiting Earth and watched the greatest fleet in human history assemble in the darkness. Every ship bristled with weapons that had never been tested in real combat. Every weapon had been designed with one purpose: to make the aliens understand the magnitude of their mistake. As the fleet prepared to depart for Volteran space, Admiral Tae-jin thought about Ambassador Hanul and her dream of friendship between species. That dream had died in an alien torture chamber, but something new had been born from its ashes. The Volterans wanted to teach humanity about their place in the galactic order, and humanity was about to return the favor. The transformation of human civilization happened so fast that it seemed like magic, but it was not magic at all. It was the result of decades of careful planning by military leaders who understood that peace was only possible when backed by the threat of overwhelming force. Every human colony, every research station, every peaceful farming world had been built with war in mind. Captain Woojin stood in the command center of the orbital shipyard above New Seoul and watched as the facility that had been building passenger liners 12 hours ago was now assembling the hull of a battleship. The entire production line had been reconfigured in less than a day using modular construction systems that were hidden in what everyone thought were civilian manufacturing plants. The blueprints for every weapon system had been stored in quantum-encrypted databases, scattered across human space. The moment President Kyung-soo signed the declaration of war, those databases unlocked automatically and began transmitting construction plans to every facility capable of military production. The plans were so detailed that even civilian engineers could follow them on the mining world of Kepler Prime. Extraction crews were pulling metals from the planet's core at 10 times their normal rate. The mining equipment that had been designed for peaceful resource gathering was actually military hardware, disguised as civilian machinery. Every drill, every excavator, every transport vehicle could be converted to military use within hours. Dr. Yuna had spent 15 years studying alien biology for peaceful medical research, but now she was using that same knowledge to develop biological weapons that would target Volteran physiology specifically. Her laboratory on Europa had been equipped with military-grade research equipment hidden behind walls that looked like standard medical facilities. The biological weapons Dr. Yuna was creating were not designed to kill quickly. Instead, they were engineered to cause maximum psychological impact on enemy forces. The weapons would make Valteran soldiers too sick to fight but keep them alive long enough to spread fear among their comrades. It was a form of warfare that went beyond simple killing engineer. Sung Ho had designed the defensive systems for human colonies thinking about protection from pirates and natural disasters, but every calculation had included variables for fighting advanced alien military forces, the shield generators and weapon platforms that protected human worlds were much more powerful than any alien intelligence had realized. The most impressive transformation was happening in the research facilities, scattered throughout human space scientists who had been studying theoretical physics were suddenly applying their knowledge to create weapons that bent the laws of reality, weapons that could phase through solid matter, weapons that could manipulate gravity itself, weapons that could tear holes in the fabric of space and time. Captain Wu Jin received his orders to take command of the battleship Retribution. While the ship was still being assembled around him, the vessel was 3 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon, but firepower was not its most dangerous feature. The ship was equipped with psychological warfare systems designed to break enemy morale before the first shot was fired. The human fleet that assembled in Earth orbit was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 300 warships, each one representing the pinnacle of human military engineering, but the ships were just the visible part of humanity's war machine. The real weapons were the humans themselves and the cold fury that burned in their hearts. General Subin established her command center on the flagship Judgment and began coordinating the most complex military operation in human history. She was not just planning to defeat the Valteran military, she was planning to demonstrate to every alien species in the galaxy that humanity could not be threatened with impunity. The human approach to warfare was fundamentally different from how other species fought. Wars between alien civilizations were usually about controlling territory or resources or trade routes. Human war was about sending a message that would prevent future conflicts by making the cost of aggression too high for any rational species to accept. Intelligence officers had been studying Valteran culture and psychology for years. Using data gathered from peaceful trade negotiations, they understood how the alien mind worked. They knew what would frighten Valterans more than simple death. They knew how to break an entire civilization's will to resist the weapons humans had developed were designed not just to destroy Valteran military assets, but to demonstrate overwhelming technological superiority. Every human attack would show the aliens that their most advanced defenses were useless against human ingenuity. Every victory would prove that resistance was futile. Admiral Taejin reviewed the tactical plans while standing on the bridge of the command ship. Each attack had been calculated to achieve maximum psychological impact with minimum loss of human life. The goal was not to conquer Valteran territory, but to convince every alien in the galaxy that threatening humanity was suicide. The human fleet included ships equipped with quantum tunneling technology that could phase through enemy shields and appear inside defended positions. Other ships carried gravitational weapons that could crush enemy vessels or create artificial black holes. Other ships were equipped with reality manipulation devices that could make enemy weapons malfunction by altering the physical laws in localized space. But the most terrifying weapons in the human arsenal were not technological at all. They were tactical. The humans had developed strategies for fighting enemies who had superior numbers or more advanced technology. They had learned how to turn an enemy's strengths into weaknesses. They had mastered the art of making victory look inevitable even when outnumbered. Commander Ji-woo was assigned to lead the advanced reconnaissance force that would scout Valteran defenses before the main fleet arrived. Her ships were equipped with stealth technology that made them invisible to most sensor systems. They could observe enemy positions and gather intelligence without being detected. The reconnaissance mission revealed that Valteran military commanders had no idea what they were facing. The aliens had positioned their fleets according to conventional tactical doctrine, expecting humans to attack like any other species. They had prepared for a war of attrition involving massive battles between opposing fleets. What the Valterans did not understand was that humans had studied their military tactics for decades. Human strategists knew exactly how Valteran commanders would respond to different threats. They had prepared counters for every possible defensive strategy. The aliens were about to fight an enemy that knew their playbook better than they did. The human war plan was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of engaging Valteran forces in direct combat wherever possible, human ships would bypass enemy defenses entirely. They would strike at industrial targets and supply lines. They would demonstrate that Valteran military might was an illusion that could be shattered whenever humans chose to do so. General Subin sent a final message to all human forces before the fleet departed for Valteran space. She reminded them that they were not just fighting for revenge, they were fighting to establish a new order in the galaxy, where peaceful species could exist without fear of predators like the Valtoranche. Message explained that every human action in the coming war would be watched by alien civilizations throughout the galaxy. Those aliens would judge whether humanity deserved to be treated as equals or whether humans were just another species of victims waiting to be slaughtered. The war would prove once and for all which judgment was correct. As the human fleet activated their hyperspace drives and vanished into the darkness between stars, Admiral Tejan thought about Ambassador Hanul and her belief that different species could coexist peacefully. That belief had died in a Valteran torture chamber, but it was about to be reborn in a very different form. The galaxy was about to learn that humans could be friends or enemies, but never victims. The lesson would be written in Valteran blood and sealed with human steel. The first Valteran system to fall was Kethmor, a heavily defended fortress world that guarded one of their most important hyperspace routes. The Valteran commanders had positioned their entire Third Fleet around the planet, confident that no enemy force could break through their layered defensive shields and weapons platforms. They were wrong. Commander Ji Woo led her squadron through hyperspace using routes that should not have existed according to Valteran star charts. Human scientists had discovered that space itself could be folded in ways that alien mathematics had never imagined. The human ships emerged from impossible angles, appearing inside the Valteran defensive perimeter like ghosts materializing from nightmares. The battle lasted exactly 7 minutes and 32 seconds. Valteran defensive systems that had never failed in 3 centuries of warfare were torn apart by weapons that seemed to ignore the laws of physics. Human ships phased through solid matter, appearing inside enemy vessels before unleashing devastating attacks from within. Enemy shields that could stop planet-killing weapons were useless against attacks that came from inside the protected area. Admiral Korthavar was commanding the Valteran Third Fleet from his flagship when human vessels began materializing around him. His first instinct was to order his ships to retreat and regroup, but the human attack had been planned to make retreat impossible. Every escape route had been blocked by invisible human ships that revealed themselves only when Valteran vessels tried to flee. The human weapons did not simply destroy Valteran ships, they dissected them with surgical precision. Energy beams cut through alien hulls like scalpels, removing weapon systems and engines while leaving life support intact. The message was clear: humanity could have killed everyone aboard the enemy vessels, but chose not to. The restraint was more terrifying than genocide would have been. Commander Ji Woo broadcast a message to the surviving Valteran ships, offering them a choice. They could surrender and be taken prisoner with full rights under the laws of war, or they could continue fighting and be destroyed. The choice was genuine, but the outcome was inevitable. Every Valteran commander who chose to keep fighting watched their ship torn apart by weapons they could not understand or counter. The news of Kethmor's fall reached the Valteran High Command within hours, but they refused to believe the reports. No single fleet could destroy an entire star system's defenses in less than 8 minutes. The reports had to be exaggerated or the result of some kind of technical malfunction in the communication systems. High Merchant Vexstar ordered the Second and Fourth Fleets to investigate what had happened at Kethmor. The combined force included over 400 warships and represented the largest military deployment in Valteran history. Surely no alien species could stand against such overwhelming force. The human response to this massive Valteran fleet was swift and brutal. Captain Wu Jin's battleship Retribution led a task force that intercepted the alien armada in deep space between star systems. The humans attacked using tactics that defied everything Valteran strategists thought they knew about warfare. Instead of engaging in a traditional fleet battle, the humans used their reality manipulation weapons to create localized distortions in space-time. Valteran ships found themselves attacking empty space while human vessels materialized behind them. Coordination between alien vessels became impossible when communication signals were bent through folded space and arrived at their destinations hours before they were sent. The psychological impact on Valteran crews was devastating. Their most advanced weapons were useless against an enemy that could phase in and out of normal reality. Their most experienced commanders were helpless against tactics that seemed more like magic than military strategy. Morale collapsed as Valteran soldiers realized they were fighting an enemy that was fundamentally superior in every way. Admiral Taejin observed the battle from his command ship and felt no satisfaction. In the easy victory, the humans were not fighting for the joy of conquest. They were fighting to send a message to every species in the galaxy about the consequences of cruelty. The message had to be written clearly enough that even the most arrogant alien civilizations could understand its system. After system fell to the human advance, but the pattern was always the same. Human forces would appear without warning using impossible tactics and overwhelming technology. They would destroy military targets with surgical precision while leaving civilian populations completely untouched. The contrast between human mercy toward innocents and human ruthlessness toward enemies was deliberate and terrifying. The Valteran colony world of Nexthara had been considered impregnable because of its position in a nebula that scrambled most sensor systems and made hyperspace navigation extremely dangerous. Human ships emerged from the nebula itself, having somehow learned to use the chaotic energy fields as camouflage. The defending fleet never had a chance to organize a proper response. General Subin coordinated the attack on Nexthara from her flagship while studying reports from battles across Valteran space. The pattern was clear. Alien resistance was crumbling, not because they lacked courage, but because they were facing an enemy that operated by completely different rules. Conventional military thinking was useless against human innovation. The Valterans tried every desperate strategy they could imagine. They formed alliances with pirate fleets and mercenary forces. They hired alien weapons designers to create new technologies. They even attempted to negotiate with other major galactic powers for military assistance. But every effort failed because no one else wanted to fight an enemy that could make their most powerful weapons obsolete. Overnight, Captain Minho led the assault on the Valteran Industrial Center at Vorthek, using a strategy that became known as the Ghost Fleet attack. His ships approached the heavily defended system using stealth technology that made them invisible to every known form of detection. The first indication Valteran defenders had of the attack was when their orbital factories began exploding. The destruction of Vorthek was particularly devastating because the Valterans had concentrated most of their military production in one star system. They believed that massing their industrial capacity would make it easier to defend. Now they watched helplessly as centuries of technological development was reduced to debris floating in space. Other alien species throughout the galaxy monitored the human-Valteran war with growing alarm. Intelligence reports described human capabilities that seemed impossible according to known scientific principles. Ships that could exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Weapons that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. Tactics that treated space and time as tools to be used rather than barriers to be overcome. The Threx Empire, which controlled territory adjacent to Valteran space, sent diplomatic messages to their former allies, essentially abandoning them to their fate. The message was polite, but the meaning was clear. The Threx had no intention of helping the Valterans fight an enemy that could destroy entire fleets in minutes. Corvani Trade Federation went even further and began negotiating with human representatives about establishing peaceful relations. They offered to share intelligence about Valteran military capabilities in exchange for guarantees that human forces would not attack Corvani territory. The message to the galaxy was becoming clear. Cooperation with humanity offered benefits, while opposition offered only destruction. As human forces closed in on the core Valteran system's resistance became increasingly desperate and futile. Valteran commanders threw their remaining ships into suicidal attacks that accomplished nothing except proving human technological superiority. Enemy vessels were swatted aside like insects. attacking a giant commander Duhayan who had survived the torture and murder of Ambassador. Hanul was given command of a special operations unit tasked with capturing High Merchant Vextar alive. The mission was not about revenge, but about justice. The alien leader would face trial for his crimes, but first he would witness the complete destruction of everything he had built. The final assault on Valtara Prime began with a demonstration of human power that was visible from the planet's surface. Human ships created artificial auroras in the sky by manipulating electromagnetic fields. The lights danced across the heavens in patterns that spelled out messages in the Valtaran language. The messages were simple surrender or face complete annihilation. Vextar watched the light show from his palace and finally understood that his species had made an error so fundamental that it threatened their very existence. The humans were not the weak prey animals he had believed them to be. They were apex predators who had been disguised as diplomats. The disguise was now removed, and the galaxy would never be the same. The human fleet surrounded Valtara Prime like a steel noose tightening around the throat of an empire. 300 warships hung in perfect formation above the purple world where Ambassador Hanul had died. Each ship represented thousands of human lives dedicated to ensuring that such cruelty would never happen again. General Subin stood on the bridge of her flagship Judgment and looked down at the world that had started this war. The planet looked peaceful from space with its swirling purple clouds and gleaming cities, but she knew that somewhere down there, High Merchant Vextar was waiting in his crystal palace, probably still believing that his superior alien intellect would find a way to escape the consequences of his actions. The final message to the Valtaran government was delivered not by communication beam, but by a single human shuttle that landed in the courtyard of the High Council Chamber's commander. Duhain stepped out of the shuttle wearing his dress uniform and carrying a datapad containing humanity's terms for ending the war. The terms were simple and non-negotiable: complete and unconditional surrender, immediate dissolution of the Valtaran military forces, payment of reparations to human colonies for the next 50 years. Most importantly, the Valtaran government would be restructured under human oversight to ensure that such atrocities could never happen again. Duhayan walked through the Crystal Palace where Hanul had been tortured and murdered. The halls that had once echoed with alien laughter now felt like a tomb. The few Valtaran officials who remained looked at him with expressions of fear and defeat. They had seen the footage of human fleets destroying their most powerful defenses. With casual ease, High Merchant Vextar was brought before Duhayan in chains made from the same energy that had bound the human diplomats during their torture. The alien leader no longer looked like the confident predator who had orchestrated Hanul's death. His skin had faded to a dull gray color and his white eyes darted nervously around the room. Duhayan did not speak to Vextar immediately. Instead, he activated a holographic display that showed recordings from every major battle of the war. The images showed Valtaran fleets being destroyed by weapons they could not understand, tactics they could not counter, and technology that seemed to violate the laws of physics. The recordings continued for over an hour, showing the systematic destruction of Valtaran military power across dozens of star systems. Vextar watched his empire crumble, knowing that every defeat had been the direct result of his decision to torture an innocent diplomat who had come to his world seeking friendship. When the recordings finally ended, Duhayan spoke in perfect Valtaran language, explaining that this demonstration was necessary to help the alien understand the magnitude of his mistake. He told Vextar that humanity could have conquered the entire galaxy if they had chosen to do so, but conquest had never been their goal. The goal had been to establish a new principle in galactic relations. The principle that some actions carried consequences so severe that even contemplating them was dangerous. The torture and murder of peaceful diplomats would never be tolerated again by any species anywhere in known space. Vextar finally found his voice and asked why the humans had shown mercy to Valtaran civilians during their military campaign. Duhayan explained that punishing innocents for the crimes of their leaders was exactly the kind of behavior that humanity was determined to eliminate from the galaxy. The war had been fought to establish justice, not to satisfy bloodlust. The render ceremony was broadcast throughout Valtaran space and to every major alien civilization in the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of species watched as the once mighty Valteran Empire formally submitted to human authority. The message was clear: humanity was now a major power that demanded respect. President Kyung-soo,